This is a great topic. Ben, you get credit for the topic because you did it on Locked On Wizards. And I think this is really fun. Which Washington Wizard is most likely, as we sit here and see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting the Supermax and a bunch of other max players around, which Washington Wizard is most likely to be a future Supermax player? I think it's really fun. I've got two guys that come to mind. I think it's worth probably on the front end here saying, how do you qualify for the Supermax? Because that also will help shape this. So the Supermax is this very specific thing that the NBA implemented a couple years ago that says to qualify for a Supermax, the player typically needs to have 7 or 8 years of NBA experience on the team that drafted him. So you can't have ever been traded. This is why it was such a big deal when Luka got traded, amongst all the other reasons. But like he lost so much money by being traded because he was no longer eligible for the Supermax. And then this is kind of the big thing. They need to meet certain performance thresholds, such as being named to an All-NBA in the previous season or 2 of the 3 preceding seasons. So you make All-NBA, you're like in the year you're up for the extension, you're eligible. Or if you made it in 2 of the preceding 3 years, so say you got hurt and you miss All-NBA or your performance dipped, but you'd already qualified because the 2 years prior you made it, then you're good. Or you can be named Defensive Player of the Year, or being named in the previous season or 2 of the preceding 3, or being named MVP in any of the preceding 3 seasons. So you need to be an MVP, time right an All-NBA team, or Defensive Player of the Year. So if those are the criteria, Ben, who do you think is the most likely Washington Wizard to be Supermax eligible?
To start things off, I think in DC specifically here, there's a lot of personal opinions about the Supermax contract that have been swayed because of what has happened with people who got Supermax contracts here in our nation's capital. Wall and Beal, of course, terrible endings. Have to put those feelings to the side because this team needs a superstar player. If you have somebody that's all NBA worthy or MVP worthy, God forbid, on this Wizards team, you have to be thrilled about that. So just get that out of the way. For me, the former number 2 overall pick, Alex Sarr, is who I'd go with. One, because of the size and what he's able to do at his size. He's a guy that has good speed, quick with the basketball, and has stretched his game to play outside the perimeter well. Now, he was inefficient offensively in his rookie year, especially around the rim. I think if you're over 7 foot, to shoot under 40% from the field is a little bit concerning. With that being said, I do think he improves a lot like he did in the second half of the season. And because he plays so well on the defensive side of the basketball, protecting the rim, he's a guy that if he polishes his offensive game and also gets a little bit better as a rebounder, I think that's somewhere he has to improve as well. I could see him being a top-of-the-line stretch 4 in the NBA and being an all-NBA type of player.
I think Sarr is interesting on 2 fronts. The absolute best version of Alex Sarr takes on all of like the freaky athleticism and length that he's got and turns himself into a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And if so he were, let's say it's, because remember, the reason, so there is actually another version of the Supermax that's for younger players. Like I said, you have to be in year 7 or 8. If you hit some of these other thresholds earlier, it's just not as big a percentage of the cap. So that's ultimately what we're talking about here. Like the big Supermax is 35% of the cap in the given year that you sign it, with max raises year over year moving forward, which I believe are 8%. So that gets real nerdy real fast, but that's what we're talking about here, right? But let's say in the year that he's extension eligible, the Wizards are really good. So we're like 4 years down the line. He's awesome. They're awesome defensively. He's the anchor of a Oklahoma City-esque type of run defensively. And maybe he doesn't ever polish offensively enough to make a third team even All-NBA, but he's the Defensive Player of the Year. Is that totally off the table? No. I also find it hard to believe that if you're Defensive Player of the Year, you wouldn't somehow squeak onto an All-NBA team. That feels like a weird needle to thread, but I guess it's possible.
I have a question, and he might have been on an All-NBA team, but this is maybe the only player I can think of in my head that might actually fit that threshold. Was Joakim Noah an All-NBA player the year he won Defensive Player of the Year? I guess we have to look that up.
I can look that up real quick.
But he was so bad offensively, I feel like it might be possible that he wasn't. But I could be completely wrong.
I feel like he probably would have been
at least a third team, right?
Yeah, I think, let's see, Defensive Player of the Year.
In 2014.
Yeah, he was All-NBA first team that year.
He was first team.
Yeah, and he finished fourth in MVP voting that year.
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Finished fourth in MVP voting, averaging 12 points and 11 rebounds. But he had 5 assists, over a steal, block and a half. They were awesome. Yeah, he played 80 games.
It's kind of overshadowed that Nene actually cooked in that series for the most part. And even though he was suspended for a game, I think he really held his own against Noah and scored the ball really effectively in that series. But it's irrelevant. That happened 10 years ago. It doesn't matter anymore.
Long time ago. So, but even if he's in contention for DPOY, like, is he probably a third team guy, if not better? Yeah, that's possible. That's not my answer, though. I think Tre Johnson has a chance to be a stud, dude. Like, I just, something about that kid, the way he's wired, the way he shoots it, the way he works, the way he's open to feedback, how coachable he is. If the stuff that needs to get better for him can get better, I think he's the answer. And so, like, is Bilal going to develop into a really good player? I think so. I think he showed last year a huge step from year 1 to year 2. And I'm excited to see what the year 1 to year 2 step is for Bub this year. Will Dawkins, the way his eyes lit up in the postseason press conference when talking about Keyshawn George, when he's like, man, wait till you guys see what Keyshawn's already done, right, in a couple of months. And maybe I guess it was a pre-draft. I don't remember when it was. Maybe it was when he was on with the Junkies pre-draft. But he sometime recently, where there had been a little bit of time since the end of the season, he's like, man, wait till you guys see what Keyshawn George has already done this offseason. So I'm excited to see what those guys can be. But none of them, because of the shooting prowess and the scoring ability, have the potential offensively as Tre Johnson. And for that reason, I think my answer is Tre, a guy who last year at 18 years old led the SEC, one of the best conferences in terms of depth and quality we've seen in recent, like, this new version of college basketball. He led the league in scoring. I think I'd probably bet on that guy. That's my answer.
I think it's a good pick as well. And with the way college basketball stacks up, and I think you just made that point. You hit it on the head right there. That's an 18-year-old kid that's essentially dominating, scoring the basketball against dudes who are 23. So it leaves me no doubt that he's going to be able to score effectively here at the next level, because it's genuinely hard to be a really good college basketball player at 18, 19 years old now.
Especially when you're your own point guard and you seem to not get along on the court. You can't get the ball.
Yeah, he was carrying the team for the most part, which is the craziest thing. And I know there was some concerns about him defensively taking off plays, but maybe because he had to carry the team so damn much offensively that it's tough to be able to go a full 40 minutes on both sides of the ball at that point. I think he's not going to have that issue in the NBA.
Which Washington Wizard is most likely to be a future Supermax player? And again, you got to be MVP kind of in the discussion. If you win it, you're eligible. If you are first, second, or third team All-NBA, or you win Defensive Player of the Year, certain, whether you win it in the year you're extension eligible or 2 of the 3 years prior, then you get the Supermax. I will also say this, with all due respect to all of the players, unless you're going to be like LeBron James or Stephen Curry and you're so good it doesn't matter, it almost doesn't matter who else is on your team, then you kind of hope if you're a fan and you're just interested in winning, that nobody is the answer. Like, you want them to miss it just by that much. Like, what you'd really want is a player, like, you want Tre Johnson in 2 years before he's eligible to be like first team All-NBA or second team All-NBA, and he's awesome. And then the next year, for whatever reason, like, he doesn't actually get that much worse, but like someone else has an incredible season, and like he misses it. And so he misses it by that much. So you have an awesome player like who's that good without having to pay them the Supermax because then you're in a better cap situation. And like this is the stupidity of the Supermax contract. It hurts teams.
It's awful.
You're negotiating against yourself. I'm all for the players getting the money. I do not begrudge them. But like if you get it, it makes team building harder. Just count the extra cash that the players get, not against the cap. Make it automatic. There's no negotiation. If your team, your incumbent team, signs you to a max contract and you've qualified for Supermax, you get the Supermax. And if the NBA player or if the NBA owners want to pool like an extra bit of money together where it's not all on one incumbent owner, like they can figure out how to separate their money. But if you are lucky enough to have a player that good, you should not be punished by having to feel like you have to pay them more, even though you're negotiating against nobody, or you have to insult them and be like, sorry, we're not giving you that. But like that's the situation that teams get put in. It is one of the sillier CBA rules, I think, in all of sports.
When Beal was in the midst of his career best season where he led the NBA in scoring, all of the comments, all of the hubbub about Bradley Beal, the NBA better give him the respects he deserves. Wizards fans were begging the NBA to include him in the All-NBA third-team list or whatever list they put him on at that point. And I was the only one back then saying, no, do you guys not understand what you are doing? You are going to push this narrative, and he's going to get on the All-NBA third team, and this franchise will be set back forever because of this decision. I knew from the start that Beal was not a player that deserved the contract he did, yet alone a no-trade clause. Let's never do that again, please.
Well,
no more trade clauses,
There's a
ever.
reason that nobody has no trade clauses, and that was clearly a mistake by the front office at the time.
There's one outlier
messed it up.
on the no-trade clause list. There is one outlier in that list.
Yeah, even Steph doesn't have one.
Exactly.
Like, LeBron has one, that's basically it. And it's, I don't know. I'm all for, I wish there were more no trade clauses. I think the fact that dudes can just be up and be like, hey, by the way, you're moving to Portland tomorrow. Like, that's crazy. These are people with families who sign contracts. But, like, from a team building standpoint, if I'm on the front office side, I'm literally never giving one. Like, sorry, no. And especially on a Supermax, because it's like, what are you going to do? Not sign it? Like, it's very, very silly. And the front office at the time made an enormous mistake, obviously, with that, which is why they're no longer here and they hire new people.
Yeah.
So with that said, in a way, this is a very silly discussion because in a way, you hope you don't. But also, like, what you really hope is that, like, you have a perennial first-team All-NBA. Like, the Oklahoma City Thunder have no problem with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting the Supermax because he's scored 30 a game. I don't think people realize this unless you're listening to the show over the last month. Then I've told you. Ben, pop quiz. How many straight years has Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scored 30 points a game?
1.
Try 3.
It's 3 years in a row.
He scored 30 a game 3 years in a row. I think we've actually, like, he won the MVP this year, so it's hard to be like, that guy's underrated. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, despite the fact that he just won MVP, Finals MVP, and is an NBA champion, I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is actually underrated.
I had no idea it was 30 for the past 3. I knew he was upper 20s at least.
Yeah, I didn't either until I looked it up a couple of weeks ago. He has averaged 30 a game in 3 straight seasons. That is insane territory.
Yeah, he had one of the more impressive scoring seasons in recent memory. Before leading into the NBA Finals, he had scored more points than anybody in a single season since 1993 with Michael Jordan. So that tells you what kind of company he's surrounded by now.
Yeah, when you talk about like average and then not missing games, the total accumulation plus playoffs, like, yeah, he's one of the most consistent, reliable, prolific players. He's actually, despite the fact that he doesn't shoot a ton of threes, like he's actually super efficient as well. Because of how well he drives it. And obviously, I think unlike Brunson, where he's like hunting for fouls, like Shai gets fouled.
Can I offer you a question here that's actually, I've been thinking about this for a while.
Sure.
From a Wizard fan standpoint or just the Wizards organization here.
Fire
so
away.
We're having this conversation about Supermax players and how you almost kind of hope that they slightly miss the threshold so you can avoid this kind of situation, but also at the same time, you hope that you have an all-NBA caliber player here in D.C. at some point sooner rather than later. for next year, if somehow all of these guys, not saying this is likely at all, but if all these guys take a huge jump in year number 2 and then year number 3 of Bilal, if they get to the point where they're almost playing just below 500 level basketball, as a fan, would you be concerned that you're just kind of reaching a point where you're going to be mediocre and then you're losing your draft pick, or are you stoked for the development?
I think you're stoked for the development. My guess would be that the organization would continue to find ways to play like the guys even farther down, right? Like the Kobe Joneses, right? Mm-hmm. Like they would take those players, like develop AJ Johnson more by giving him more minutes. And like you have even a next wave of young guys that you think are going to be role players for you in the future. And they're playing more minutes. You're kind of, and by the way, like, does it sound kind of cheap in a way? Does it sound a little skeezy, a little tankish? Yeah, of course. But if you look at all the injuries that are happening to Tyrese Halliburton and Dame Lillard and, Jason Tatum, like Jason Tatum's not old, but like think how many minutes Jason Tatum accumulated as playing competitive basketball because his teams were good pretty instantly. They had Kyrie, like all that kind of stuff. Think of how many heavy minutes those guys played when they were young. I
feel that's what makes what LeBron has done his entire career.
It's
because
stupid.
He has played, I don't know, you'd have to do the math in terms of games played, but he's almost played an extra couple seasons of just playoff games.
Oh, he has played a couple extra seasons.
It's like 3 or 4 years, isn't it, at least?
Yeah, no doubt. If you think about, like, he's played probably 20 playoff games, and I mean, in that run where he went to 8 straight finals, that's probably like an extra 20 games a year. That's like 2 extra seasons. And so if you want to make the argument, like, you're load managing a 20-year-old, yeah, I don't want him to snap his Achilles when he's 26. And so if you want to make that argument, I think for this year, because of the pick protection, like, I believe Will Dawkins when he says, hey, if our guys are so good that our pick goes to the Knicks, like, we'll deal with that. But I think if you're kind of on the line, then you'll probably just be like, we're going to make sure that our guys are playing, like our good players are playing 25 minutes a night. We'll throw out some lineups that have a couple extra young guys in it. Maybe we take the Chris Middletons and the Marcus Smarts and the CJ McCollums out even more. Maybe we flip those guys when we would have otherwise held on. Like, they'll find ways, I think, I would guess, to make sure that they keep that pick.
I don't think they'll have this problem either.
And to be clear, honestly, I also think that we are a year away from having this problem. And at that point, hopefully, you have AJ DeBonsa and you've gotten the number 1 pick in next year's draft. Whether you win the lottery from 7 or win the lottery from 1, I don't really care about that. Just get lucky, win the lottery.
That's a big ask.
Of course, but that's kind of where I see it. Is like they'll find a way to keep the pick, and then you hope that that's a problem that you're dealing with 2 years from now. But it is. I do think we're 2 years away from, because then we're also talking about like Bilal extension. Like, you're starting to talk about some stuff where it's like, dang, if they could have gotten lucky sooner. Could they have done some things differently, or do they have to wind up flipping one of these guys in the future and extending the timeline a little farther because your best player is 19 years old and Bilal's in year 4? Like, those are I think the complicated questions this front office is going to have to eventually wrestle with. But you hope that they're really, really good and there's kind of either you keep the players because they're awesome, or you get incredible return because they're awesome.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.